The penthouse overlooked the glowing Manhattan skyline. Snow drifted slowly past the tall glass windows, turning the city lights into a blur of gold and silver. Inside, Gregory Hale raised a glass of champagne. Across from him, Vanessa Cole laughed softly, adjusting the bracelet Gregory had just given her. The small red Cartier box still sat open on the marble kitchen island. "Best Christmas ever," she said, holding up her phone to capture the skyline behind them. Gregory smiled. The view from this midtown penthouse always impressed people. The city below looked powerful, endless, like success itself. He didn't think about the house in the Hamptons. He didn't think about Claire. Vanessa leaned against him, scrolling through the photo she had just taken. "Your wife doesn't mind you being in the city tonight?" she asked, casually. Gregory shrugged. "She's used to it. Work, holiday events, you know how it is." He didn't mention that Claire had asked earlier that week if he would be home for Christmas. He also didn't remember something even more important. Tonight was her birthday. Miles away, in the quiet Hamptons mansion, Claire Whitmore sat alone at the long dining table. A small cake rested in front of her. Just one candle. She had bought it herself from a little bakery in town. The house was silent. Claire checked her phone once more. No message. No call. Midnight arrived quietly. She watched the candle burn for a moment longer, then gently blew it out. Outside, snow covered the long driveway of the mansion Gregory believed was his. Claire stood, walked to the window, and looked at the frozen ocean beyond the trees. 18 years of marriage. And tonight, he had forgotten the day she was born. Claire picked up an envelope from the table. She had already written the letter hours ago. The movers would arrive in the morning, and by the time Gregory came home from his Christmas celebration, everything would be gone. The snow had stopped by morning. Gregory Hale drove back toward the Hamptons with one hand on the wheel of his Mercedes S-Class, the heater humming softly as pale winter sunlight stretched across the highway. Vanessa had fallen asleep beside him for most of the drive. Her head tilted against the window, the glitter from last night's party still faintly visible along her eyelids. Gregory felt strangely satisfied. The night had been effortless. Champagne, laughter, the view from the penthouse balcony, Vanessa wrapped in a Dior coat he had insisted on buying her earlier that week. For a moment, life had felt uncomplicated. No questions, no expectations, just admiration. Vanessa finally stirred as they turned onto the long coastal road leading toward Gregory's estate. "You're really going back this early?" she asked sleepily. Gregory shrugged. "Claire likes her traditions. A Christmas brunch, the fireplace going, all that." Vanessa smirked slightly. "You mean the performance?" Gregory chuckled, though something about the word lingered longer than he liked. As the car passed the familiar wooden sign welcoming them into the Hamptons, Gregory checked his phone. A dozen emails from work. A few missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. But none from Claire. That struck him as unusual. Claire always sent at least one message on Christmas morning. Unusually something simple. "Drive safe. Come home soon." Today, there was nothing. Vanessa noticed his silence. "No holiday message from the wife?" she teased lightly. Gregory slid the phone back into his coat pocket. "She's probably busy setting up the house." They turned onto the long private road that led to the estate. Tall pine trees lined both sides, their branches heavy with fresh snow. Gregory slowed the car as the wrought iron gates appeared ahead. Something felt off. The security gate was already open, and the long driveway beyond it looked strangely empty. Usually, Claire had the staff park their cars along the side during holidays. Today, there was no one. Gregory pulled the Mercedes forward slowly. When the mansion finally came into full view, Vanessa sat upright. Gregory. He didn't answer, because the massive Hamptons house, 20,000 square feet of stone and glass, looked completely dark. No lights. No decorations glowing in the windows. And when Gregory stepped out of the car, the silence around the property felt so absolute that even the sound of snow crunching beneath his shoes seemed too loud. Vanessa followed him up the front steps. Gregory pushed open the front door. The echo that answered them was the first sign. The house was empty. Gregory stepped into the mansion slowly, the echo of the front door closing behind him sounding far louder than it should have. The air inside felt different. Cold. Still. The usual scent of Claire's winter candles, vanilla and cedar, was gone. Vanessa's heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked in behind him, her eyes scanning the vast foyer. "Okay, this is weird," she murmured. The towering Christmas tree that normally stood beside the grand staircase was gone. No ornaments, no lights, no wrapped presents, just an empty space. Gregory frowned. "Claire?" he called out. His voice carried through the enormous house, bouncing off bare walls and polished floors. No answer. He walked into the living room. The leather couches were gone. The Persian rug had vanished. Even the paintings that once lined the walls had disappeared, leaving pale rectangles where they had hung for years. Vanessa let out a low whistle. "Did someone rob you?" Gregory's jaw tightened. "No, that's impossible." He pulled out his phone, quickly opening the security app connected to the house system. The cameras were offline, all of them. Now, something in his chest began to tighten. He moved quickly toward the kitchen. The massive marble island still stood in the center of the room, but the bar stools were missing. So was the espresso machine Claire used every morning. And sitting alone on the smooth, white marble surface was a single envelope. Gregory froze. His name was written on it. Gregory. No anger in the handwriting, no accusation. Just calm, careful script he recognized instantly. Vanessa leaned closer. "Well, aren't you going to open it?" Gregory picked up the envelope slowly. Something about the quiet in the house made the paper feel heavier than it should. He opened it. Inside was one sheet of cream-colored stationery. Claire's handwriting filled the page. He began reading. "Gregory, by the time you read this, the house will be empty. Don't worry, nothing was stolen. Everything here was legally mine." Gregory frowned, reading faster now. "You probably didn't realize it, but last night wasn't just Christmas Eve. It was also my birthday." His fingers tightened around the paper. Vanessa watched his expression carefully. Gregory continued. "I waited for your call. I waited until midnight." The next line made the room feel even colder. 18 years of marriage ended the moment I blew out my birthday candle alone. At the bottom of the page was the final sentence. "Take care of yourself, Gregory. Claire." And for the first time that morning, Gregory felt something that looked a lot like panic. Gregory stood in the silent kitchen, the letter trembling slightly in his hand. Vanessa leaned against the marble island, arms crossed, watching his face carefully. "So, she moved out," Vanessa said casually. "That's dramatic, but honestly, she'll come back. Women like her always do." Gregory didn't answer. His eyes were still locked on Claire's handwriting. For the first time in years, Memories began creeping back into his mind. Memories he had long ignored. 18 years. When Gregory first met Claire, he was just a struggling financial analyst working out of a cramped office in Midtown Manhattan. His salary barely covered rent. Claire had been the steady one. She worked 2 jobs back then, teaching part-time at a community college during the day and managing the front desk at a small wellness clinic at night. Gregory remembered how she used to fall asleep on the couch with papers still in her hands. Yet every morning, she would still wake up early and make him coffee. Even after his first big promotion at the investment firm on Park Avenue, Claire never changed. When Gregory decided to start his own consulting company, everyone told him it was too risky. Everyone except Claire. She sold her small inheritance from her grandmother to help him launch the business. He still remembered the night she handed him the check. "It's not just your dream," she had told him quietly. "It's ours." Within 5 years, the company had exploded in growth. Gregory's name started appearing in business magazines. They moved into the massive mansion overlooking the Hudson River. Luxury cars filled the driveway. Montblanc pens and Rolex watches became normal gifts from business partners. And slowly, almost without noticing, Gregory stopped seeing Claire as the woman who helped build it all. She became background. Someone who handled dinners, events, birthdays, and quiet details of life he no longer paid attention to. Vanessa tapped the marble counter impatiently. "Gregory, relax," she said. "You're acting like she left forever." Gregory folded the letter slowly. A strange unease settled in his chest. Because for the first time, he realized something unsettling. Claire had never once made a dramatic move in 18 years. She never yelled, never threatened to leave, which meant if she finally walked away, it probably wasn't a moment of anger. It was a decision she had been preparing for a very long time. And suddenly, Gregory noticed something else. The wedding portrait that had always hung near the staircase was gone. Gregory slowly walked out of the kitchen, the letter still folded tightly in his hand. The mansion felt enormous now. Too quiet, too empty. Vanessa followed him through the hallway, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Greg, seriously," she said with a small laugh. "You're acting like someone died." Gregory stopped near the grand staircase. Something about the house felt wrong. Not just empty, carefully emptied. Claire had taken only the things that belonged to her. The antique piano she loved, the books from the library, the soft blue armchair where she used to read on winter nights. Nothing else. No broken glass, no angry notes, no mess, just absence. Vanessa walked over to the bar cabinet that still stood against the wall and opened it. "Hey, at least she left the whiskey," she said with a grin. Gregory barely reacted. His eyes were scanning the walls. Every photograph of Claire was gone. Family vacations, charity galas, their anniversary dinners, all missing. Only one picture remained, Gregory receiving an industry award 5 years earlier. Claire had been cropped out of the frame. Vanessa noticed it too and laughed softly. "Well, that's convenient." Gregory turned toward her, irritation flickering across his face. "Vanessa, not now." She shrugged. "I'm just saying, this might actually solve your problem." "What problem?" "Divorce," she said plainly. "You said yourself Claire would never agree. But if she's already packing and leaving?" Gregory rubbed his temples. His phone suddenly buzzed in his pocket. He glanced down. A notification from his bank. A large transfer notification. $3,800,000. Outgoing transfer. Gregory's stomach dropped. "What the hell?" Vanessa leaned closer. "What happened? Gregory opened the banking app quickly. Another notification appeared. $2,400,000. Outgoing transfer. His face turned pale. That's impossible, he muttered. Vanessa frowned. Gregory, how much money does she even have access to? Gregory didn't answer. His fingers moved rapidly across the screen. Account statements. Transaction history. Legal ownership lines. Then he saw it. Several accounts listed under Claire's name. Not joint. Not shared. Sole ownership. Gregory's heart began beating faster. Vanessa leaned closer to read the screen. So she took some money, she said. Relax, you're still rich. Gregory slowly lowered the phone. Because what he had just realized was far worse. Claire hadn't taken his money. She had taken money that legally belonged to her. And Gregory suddenly remembered something he had completely forgotten. Claire had insisted on very specific financial paperwork years ago. Paperwork Gregory had signed without reading carefully. Vanessa frowned. Gregory, why are you looking at your phone like that? Gregory swallowed hard. Because, he said quietly, I think Claire owns a lot more of my life than I realized. Gregory sank into the only chair left in the dining room, a stiff wooden one Claire used to keep near the window for morning coffee. The massive oak table felt strangely oversized without its usual settings and decorations. Vanessa stood across from him, scrolling through her phone impatiently. Gregory, you're overreacting, she said. Even if she moved some money, you're still worth millions. Gregory didn't respond immediately. He was staring at the banking documents on his phone. Numbers, account names, ownership details, things he had ignored for years. Then another memory surfaced, 10 years earlier. The company had just signed its first major contract with a hedge fund on Wall Street. Gregory had been overwhelmed with meetings, interviews, and late-night negotiations. Claire had handled the legal paperwork at home. He remembered her sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of documents, her MacBook open, glasses resting low on her nose. You should read these before signing, she had said calmly. Gregory had waved a hand dismissively. Claire, it's just asset structuring. Our lawyer already approved it. It's still important, she insisted. But Gregory had been in a rush. He had grabbed the Mont Blanc pen a client gifted him and signed every page without reading more than the headings. Back in the present, Gregory opened the archived file attached to one of the accounts. The document appeared on his screen. Spousal Asset Protection Agreement? Vanessa walked around the table and leaned over his shoulder. Is that a prenup? Gregory shook his head slowly. No. He scrolled further down. Claire's name appeared under multiple investment accounts, real estate trusts, stock portfolios, several properties listed under limited liability companies. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. Wait, she owns property? Gregory continued reading. One line made his chest tighten. The primary residence, legally purchased under Claire Bennett Trust. Vanessa blinked. Is that this house? Gregory nodded slowly. Vanessa laughed, thinking it was a joke. Okay, that's funny. Gregory wasn't laughing. He scrolled further. Another document appeared. Transfer agreement signed 7 years earlier. Claire had quietly moved portions of their investments into separate structures. Completely legal, completely documented. Gregory suddenly understood something terrifying. He had built a massive business empire, but Claire had quietly built the legal foundation underneath it. Vanessa crossed her arms. So what? She took some money and left the house. Gregory looked up at her, his face pale. She didn't leave the house. Vanessa frowned. What do you mean? Gregory swallowed. Legally. His voice dropped, She owns it. Vanessa stared at him, and for the first time since entering the mansion, she stopped smiling. Vanessa stared at Gregory as if she had misheard him. Wait, you're telling me your wife owns this entire mansion? She asked. Gregory didn't answer right away. His eyes were still fixed on the legal document glowing on his phone screen. The words were clear. Claire Bennett Trust, primary property ownership. Vanessa let out a small laugh, but it sounded forced. That's ridiculous. No successful businessman would sign something like that. Gregory leaned back slowly in the chair, rubbing his forehead. I signed it, he said quietly. Vanessa blinked. You didn't read it? Gregory didn't need to answer. His silence said everything. For years, he had trusted Claire with the paperwork. While he built the public image of success, she quietly handled the legal structure behind their life, and now that structure was working against him. Vanessa paced across the empty dining room. Okay, she said quickly. Even if the house is technically hers, you're still married. She can't just kick you out. Gregory looked at her. She didn't kick me out. Vanessa frowned. Then why are we having this conversation? Gregory opened the final page of the document and turned the phone toward her. A clause highlighted in blue caught her attention. Property access rights during separation. Vanessa read the line twice. Her smile disappeared. You have 30 days? She said slowly. Gregory nodded. Claire had followed the law perfectly. As long as she filed a notice of separation, which she clearly already had, Gregory had exactly 30 days before he would legally lose access to the property. Vanessa's expression hardened. That's dirty, she muttered. Gregory's phone suddenly rang. Both of them looked down at the screen. Unknown number. Gregory hesitated before answering. Hello? A calm male voice spoke on the other end. Mr. Bennett, this is Daniel Carter from Carter & Lowe Legal Services. I represent Mrs. Claire Bennett. Gregory's chest tightened. Vanessa mouthed the words silently. Her lawyer? Gregory stood up slowly. What does Claire want? He asked. The lawyer's voice remained polite and professional. Mrs. Bennett has filed formal separation paperwork this morning. Gregory felt the room spin slightly. That fast? There's one more matter, the lawyer continued. Gregory swallowed. What matter? There was a brief pause on the line. Then the lawyer said something that made Gregory's grip tighten around the phone. Mr. Bennett, you should also be aware that Mrs. Bennett is currently the majority shareholder in Bennett Strategic Consulting. Vanessa's eyes widened. Gregory froze, because that wasn't possible. He had founded that company. He had built it from nothing. Yet the lawyer's calm voice continued. And according to our records, another pause. Mrs. Bennett now controls 51% of the company. Gregory's heart dropped, because suddenly the mansion wasn't the biggest thing he had just lost. Gregory stood frozen in the middle of the dining room, the phone still pressed against his ear. For a moment, he wondered if he had heard the lawyer wrong. 51%, Gregory repeated slowly. Across the room, Vanessa stared at him, trying to read his expression. The lawyer's voice remained calm. Yes, Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Though Bennett became the majority shareholder early this morning after a scheduled transfer of equity that had been legally structured several years ago. Gregory's heart began to pound. That's impossible, he said. I founded that company. Yes, the lawyer replied politely. But according to corporate filings, Mrs. Bennett has been listed as an early investment partner since the company's formation. Gregory's mind raced. He suddenly remembered that first year, back when the business was nothing more than a risky idea and a rented office in Midtown Manhattan. Claire had written the first check. It was small compared to what the company later became, but legally, it made her an investor. Gregory had never thought about it again. "Mr. Bennett," the lawyer continued, "you signed an equity expansion agreement 7 years ago that gradually increased Mrs. Bennett's share percentage as part of a tax optimization strategy." Gregory's stomach twisted. He remembered signing those documents, late at night, barely reading them, trusting Claire to manage the details. Vanessa suddenly grabbed his arm. "What did he say?" she whispered urgently. Gregory lowered the phone slightly. "She owns the company," he said. Vanessa's mouth fell open. "That's insane." Gregory returned the phone to his ear. "What does Claire want?" he asked. Another small pause. "Mrs. Bennett has no intention of damaging the company," the lawyer said. "However, there will be a board meeting tomorrow morning." Gregory frowned. "For what?" "To discuss leadership restructuring." The meaning hit Gregory instantly. "They want to remove me." "Mr. Bennett," the lawyer said carefully, "the board will simply vote based on what they believe is best for the company's future." Gregory ended the call slowly. Silence filled the empty mansion again. Vanessa paced across the room, her expression dark. "This is unbelievable," she said. "She planned all of this." Gregory didn't respond. His mind was replaying Claire's calm handwriting in the letter. No anger, no threats, just quiet certainty. Vanessa suddenly stopped pacing and looked at him. "Well," she said slowly, "if Claire thinks she can just walk away with everything—" Her lips curved into a small, calculating smile. "Maybe it's time we remind her you didn't build your success by playing nice." Gregory looked up. "Vanessa." But she had already pulled out her phone. "I know a few ways to turn situations like this around," she said. Then she added with quiet confidence, "Claire may have made the first move." She leaned closer. "But the game isn't over yet." That night, the mansion felt colder than ever. Gregory sat alone in the dark living room, a glass of untouched whiskey resting on the floor beside him. Vanessa had eventually gone upstairs to one of the guest bedrooms, complaining that the silence of the house was creepy. But Gregory couldn't sleep. In every room he walked through carried echoes of Claire's presence, or rather, her absence. He stepped into what used to be Claire's reading room. The large window still overlooked the quiet stretch of the Hudson River, but the soft blue armchair she loved was gone. Only a faint rectangle remained on the wooden floor where it had once stood. Gregory ran a hand through his hair. For years, he had believed Claire lived a simple, quiet life. She organized charity events, hosted dinners for his investors, volunteered occasionally at community programs. Nothing remarkable, nothing powerful, just Claire. Yet the events of the day told a completely different story. She had quietly secured financial control of the house, built independent accounts, and now she held majority shares of his company. Gregory suddenly realized something unsettling. He had no idea what Claire had actually been doing all these years. His phone buzzed. Vanessa had texted him from upstairs. "We need to fight back." Gregory sighed and opened the message. Another text followed. "If she's playing legal games, we can play smarter." Gregory stared at the screen. Fight Claire? The thought felt strange. Claire had never been his enemy. But Vanessa's next message appeared before he could think further. Step 1. Stop acting like the guilty husband. Step 2. Remind people you built the company. Gregory looked around the dark room again. For the first time in years, he noticed something small that had been left behind. On the corner of the windowsill sat a thin book Claire used to read. He picked it up. The cover read, Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. Gregory flipped through the pages slowly. Small notes were written in Claire's handwriting along the margins. Quiet reflections, thoughtful observations. On the final page, one line had been underlined twice. You always own the option of having no opinion. Gregory frowned. He didn't fully understand why Claire had marked that sentence, but something about it made him uneasy. Upstairs, a door suddenly opened, and Vanessa's voice echoed down the hallway. Gregory! She called. What? She leaned over the staircase railing. You might want to come see this. Gregory walked toward the stairs slowly. What is it? Vanessa held up her phone. Her expression had changed completely. You remember that charity foundation Claire runs? She asked. Gregory nodded. Well, what about it? Vanessa turned the phone screen toward him. Gregory stared. Because the article headline read, Claire Bennett announces new CEO partnership in major national foundation. And standing beside Claire in the photograph was a man Gregory had never seen before. But the caption underneath made Gregory's chest tighten. Daniel Carter. The same lawyer who had called him earlier. And according to the article, Claire and Daniel had been working together for years. Gregory stared at the phone screen in Vanessa's hand. The photo showed Claire standing confidently at a charity event podium. Behind her was the logo of a national women's education foundation. Beside her stood Daniel Carter, the same lawyer who had calmly informed Gregory about the separation earlier that day. Claire looked different in the photo. Not like the quiet woman who used to arrange dinner parties in their mansion. She looked powerful. Gregory felt something twist in his stomach. Vanessa, however, reacted very differently. Oh, this is perfect, she said. Gregory frowned. Perfect? Vanessa's eyes gleamed with calculation. If she's working publicly with her lawyer, we can flip the narrative. Gregory rubbed his forehead. Vanessa, this isn't some PR battle. It absolutely is, she replied quickly. She sat down across from him and began explaining her idea like she was presenting a marketing strategy. Listen carefully, she said. Claire left the house on Christmas Eve. On her birthday, right? Gregory nodded slowly. That's emotional, Vanessa continued. But emotions work both ways. Gregory narrowed his eyes. What are you suggesting? Vanessa leaned closer. You tell the board tomorrow that Claire abandoned the marriage during the holidays? That she's emotionally unstable? That she's being manipulated by this lawyer guy? Gregory immediately shook his head. That's not true. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Truth is flexible in business. Gregory stood up from the chair. No. Vanessa stared at him. What do you mean, no? I'm not lying about Claire. Vanessa crossed her arms. You're being naive, Gregory. She stood and walked closer to him. You think Claire is playing fair? She's taking your company, your house, your reputation? Gregory said nothing. Vanessa continued with another idea. Fine. Plan B. Gregory looked tired. What now? You threaten her financially, Vanessa said. Tell her if she doesn't negotiate, you'll drag this divorce into a public court battle. Investors hate drama. Her precious charity reputation will suffer. Gregory hesitated. For a moment, the idea seemed tempting. But then he remembered Claire sitting quietly at the kitchen table years ago, asking him to read the documents before signing them. Gregory exhaled slowly. No, Vanessa stared at him like he had lost his mind. You're refusing both options? Yes. Vanessa threw her hands in the air. Gregory, do you want to lose everything? Gregory looked down at Claire's letter again. His voice became quieter. I already did. Vanessa scoffed. This is unbelievable. She grabbed her phone and started typing rapidly. Gregory frowned. What are you doing? Vanessa smiled faintly without looking up. Well, she said casually, if you won't fight dirty. Her fingers kept moving across the screen. Maybe I'll do it for you. Gregory felt a sudden chill, because something in Vanessa's tone sounded far more dangerous than anything Claire had done so far. The next morning, Gregory arrived at the company headquarters earlier than usual. The glass tower on Park Avenue reflected the pale winter sunlight, but Gregory barely noticed it. His mind was still racing from everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. The lobby receptionist greeted him politely, although there was a strange tension in her voice. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. Gregory nodded and walked toward the elevators. For years, entering this building had filled him with pride. He had built Bennett Strategic Consulting from nothing into a respected corporate advisory firm. At least, that was what he believed. Now he wasn't so sure. Inside the elevator, Gregory checked his reflection in the mirrored wall. His tie was perfectly straight, his dark coat tailored as always. On his wrist, the same Rolex watch he had worn for years. From the outside, he still looked like the powerful CEO everyone respected. But inside, things were shifting. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Several employees stopped talking when he walked past. Two assistants exchanged quick glances. Gregory's stomach tightened. He stepped into the boardroom. The long walnut table was already surrounded by board members. Laptops were open, the documents neatly arranged in front of them. At the far end of the room sat Daniel Carter. The lawyer looked calm, composed, and completely comfortable. Gregory stopped walking. What are you doing here? He asked coldly. Daniel folded his hands on the table. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. Gregory glanced around the room. Where's Claire? Daniel spoke carefully. Mrs. Bennett decided not to attend today. Gregory felt irritation rise. Of course she didn't. One of the board members cleared his throat awkwardly. Gregory, please take a seat. Gregory sat down slowly. Daniel then slid a folder across the table toward him. Gregory frowned. What is this? A formal notice, Daniel replied. Gregory opened the folder. Inside were several legal documents, corporate restructuring papers, leadership review forms, and one page that immediately caught his attention. Vote of confidence in executive leadership. Gregory looked up sharply. You're forcing a vote? Daniel remained calm. The board requested it. Gregory scanned the faces around the table. Some looked uncomfortable. Others avoided eye contact. Only one thing was clear. The room no longer felt like it belonged to him. Gregory leaned back in his chair slowly. So this is Claire's move, he said. Daniel shook his head slightly. Actually, Mr. Bennett. He paused just long enough to make the silence heavy. This was the board's idea. Gregory's jaw tightened, because that meant something even worse. Claire hadn't asked them to remove him. They had decided it themselves. The boardroom fell into a tense silence after Daniel Carter finished speaking. Gregory leaned back in his chair, studying the faces around the long walnut table. Some of the directors looked uncomfortable, while others focused carefully on their MacBooks, avoiding eye contact. For years, these people had trusted him. Now they looked uncertain. Gregory slowly closed the folder in front of him. "So," he said calmly, "you're questioning my leadership because my wife filed for separation yesterday?" One of the senior board members, Richard Holloway, cleared his throat. "It's not just that, Gregory." Gregory narrowed his eyes. "Then what is it?" Before Richard could answer, the large screen at the front of the boardroom suddenly lit up. Everyone turned toward it. A news alert had just appeared. Daniel frowned slightly. "That wasn't scheduled." The headline appeared across the screen. "Local CEO abandoned by wife after Christmas affair scandal." Gregory's chest tightened. "What the hell is that?" The article continued scrolling automatically. Anonymous sources claim Gregory Bennett spent Christmas Eve with a younger woman at a luxury penthouse while his wife spent her birthday alone. Murmurs spread across the boardroom. Several members began whispering to each other. Gregory stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous." But the damage was already spreading. Phones around the table began buzzing. News alerts, messages from investors, emails from partners. Gregory suddenly realized exactly where the story had come from. Vanessa. She must have leaked it. He clenched his fists. This was exactly the kind of fight dirty move she had been talking about the night before. But Vanessa had made one critical mistake. The article kept updating with new details. The reporter had apparently contacted Claire for comment. Instead of denying the story, Claire had simply responded with a single sentence. "I wish Gregory peace and healing." Nothing else. No accusations, no insults. Just calm dignity. The room grew even more uncomfortable. Richard leaned forward slowly. "Gregory, this situation is becoming a reputational risk for the company." Gregory turned toward Daniel. "You planned this." Daniel shook his head calmly. "No, Mr. Bennett." He tapped the screen lightly. "Actually, this story seems to have been released by someone close to you." Gregory's stomach dropped. Because if the board discovered Vanessa was responsible, it would look like Gregory himself had staged the scandal. Richard spoke again. "The vote will proceed immediately." Gregory sat down slowly. For the first time since founding the company, he felt something terrifying. He was no longer in control of the room. And somewhere in the city, where Vanessa had just unknowingly set a trap that might destroy him completely. The boardroom remained tense as the news article continued spreading across phones and laptops. Gregory sat quietly now, his earlier confidence completely gone. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. Richard Holloway adjusted his glasses and looked around the table. "This situation is damaging the company's public image," he said carefully. "But before we proceed with the vote, there is something the board needs to clarify." Gregory looked up slowly. "What now?" Richard turned toward Daniel Carter. "Mr. Carter, earlier you mentioned Mrs. Bennett did not request this leadership review." "That is correct," Daniel replied calmly. Several board members exchanged confused looks. Richard frowned slightly. If Claire Bennett controls 51% of the company, she could have removed Gregory herself. Daniel nodded. "Yes, she could have." Gregory stared at him. "Then why didn't she?" Daniel opened a thin folder that had been resting beside his laptop. Inside were several documents. He slid one page across the table. "This," Daniel said, "is a letter Mrs. Bennett asked me to deliver to the board this morning." Gregory's stomach tightened again. Richard picked up the paper and began reading aloud. "To the board of Bennett Strategic Consulting." His voice slowed as he continued. I have no intention of removing Gregory Bennett from the company he worked so hard to build." Several board members looked surprised. Gregory frowned. Richard kept reading. Gregory may have made personal mistakes, but those do not erase the years of leadership that built this firm. Gregory blinked. The words sounded like something Claire would say. Calm. Fair. Measured. But then Richard reached the final paragraph. If the board chooses to remove him, that decision will be yours alone. The room fell silent. Gregory looked toward Daniel again. So Claire just walks away? He asked. Daniel shook his head slightly. No, Mr. Bennett. Gregory frowned. What does that mean? Daniel closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. It means Mrs. Bennett believed the board should decide whether your leadership still serves the company's future. Gregory felt something shift inside him. Claire had the power to destroy his career instantly, yet she had chosen not to use it. Instead, she had left the decision to others. Richard slowly placed the letter back on the table. Then he looked directly at Gregory. There's one more thing we need to address. Gregory sighed. What now? Richard turned his laptop toward him. The screen displayed a new message from the company's legal department. Gregory leaned closer. His eyes widened, because the investigation had just confirmed something very specific. The anonymous source who leaked the scandal story to the media had sent the information from a phone registered to Vanessa Reed, and suddenly every board member in the room was looking directly at Gregory. The boardroom fell into a heavy silence after Richard finished speaking. Every pair of eyes in the room was now fixed on Gregory. The laptop screen still displayed the legal report. The investigation had traced the anonymous leak directly to Vanessa Reed's phone number. Gregory felt his throat tighten. He knew exactly what this looked like. Richard spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. Gregory, do you have any explanation for this? Gregory rubbed his temples, trying to stay calm. Vanessa acted on her own, he said. I didn't ask her to contact the media. One of the younger board members shook his head. With respect, Gregory, that's difficult to believe. Another member added quietly. The article makes you look like the victim of a cruel wife. That kind of narrative usually doesn't appear by accident. Gregory clenched his jaw. They thought he had orchestrated the whole thing. Meanwhile, across the city, Vanessa sat inside a luxury cafe near Central Park, confidently scrolling through the news on her iPhone. She expected Gregory to call any minute, thanking her for forcing Claire into a defensive position. Instead, her phone suddenly rang. Gregory's name flashed on the screen. Vanessa smiled and answered. Well, you're welcome, she said playfully. Gregory's voice was ice cold. What did you do? Vanessa frowned. What do you mean? You leaked the story, Gregory said. Vanessa shrugged, even though he couldn't see her. I helped you. The public loves a betrayed husband. Gregory exhaled slowly. You didn't help me. Vanessa laughed lightly. Relax. Once Claire's reputation takes a hit, she'll negotiate. There was a long pause on the line. Then Gregory spoke again. Vanessa, the board traced the leak to your phone. The smile disappeared from her face. What? They think I planned it. Vanessa sat up straight. That's ridiculous. Not to them, Gregory replied quietly. Back in the boardroom, Richard folded his hands. Gregory, this situation has crossed into serious reputational damage. Another board member nodded. Regardless of who leaked the story, the public already associates this scandal with you. Gregory slowly closed his eyes. Everything had spiraled out of control. Vanessa's clever plan had turned into a disaster. And Claire, who had said almost nothing publicly, now looked like the only calm and dignified person in the entire situation. Richard finally spoke the words Gregory had feared all morning. "The board will now proceed with the vote." Gregory looked around the room one last time, because deep down, he already knew what the result would be. The vote took less than 5 minutes. To Gregory, it felt like the longest 5 minutes of his life. Each board member raised a hand when their name was called, one after another. Calm, professional, final. By the time the last vote was counted, the result was clear. 7 in favor of removing Gregory Bennett as CEO. 2 against. Gregory sat very still in his chair as the decision was recorded. Richard Holloway closed the folder in front of him and spoke gently. "Gregory, the board appreciates everything you've built here. But effective immediately, you are stepping down as CEO of Bennett Strategic Consulting." The words echoed through the room. For a moment, Gregory didn't move. The company he had spent 18 years building was no longer his to lead. Yet strangely, the anger he expected to feel never came. Only exhaustion. He stood slowly and adjusted his coat. "Understood," he said quietly. Daniel Carter watched him carefully. "Mrs. Bennett has already stated she will not interfere with your remaining shares," the lawyer added. "You will still receive the financial benefits you earned." Gregory nodded once. At least Claire had kept that promise. Across the city, Vanessa sat frozen at the cafe table, staring at the same news alert now appearing everywhere. Gregory Bennett steps down as CEO after corporate scandal. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from mutual friends. Some curious, some judgmental. Vanessa realized too late that the story she leaked had destroyed Gregory's reputation, and with it, her own connection to his world. Meanwhile, Claire Bennett was walking quietly through Central Park. Snow dusted the trees lightly. The city moved around her as usual, but something in her life had finally changed. For the first time in 18 years, she felt peaceful. Her phone buzzed gently in her coat pocket. A message from Daniel Carter. "The vote is finished." Claire read the words, then slipped the phone away. Daniel soon caught up beside her on the path. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Claire smiled faintly. "Yes." They walked together in comfortable silence. Daniel didn't push for answers. He had always respected her space. After a moment, he spoke again. "So, what happens next?" Claire looked toward the snowy skyline of Manhattan. "For the first time in a long time," she said quietly, "I get to choose." Daniel smiled. Then maybe dinner tonight?" Claire laughed softly. "Maybe. Not as revenge, not as escape, but simply as the beginning of a life she had finally reclaimed." Well, that's where this story finally comes to a close. And if you're still here with me right now, my wonderful friends, that probably means something in this story touched your heart in some quiet way. Maybe it was Claire's silence. Maybe it was the moment Gregory realized that success without respect and gratitude eventually collapses. And life has a strange way of restoring balance. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be one." Claire didn't fight loudly. She simply chose dignity, patience, and self-respect. And in the end, that quiet strength became her justice. Sometimes the biggest lesson isn't revenge. It's realizing your worth and having the courage to walk away from what no longer honors your heart. Another Stoic idea reminds us, you always have the power to choose your response, and that choice can be the beginning of healing. So if this story reminded you of someone, or maybe even a part of your own life, take it as a gentle reminder. Respect the people who stand beside you before silence becomes goodbye. And if this story meant something to you, please take a moment to like the video. Share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you more stories like this. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story is a work of fiction created for storytelling and entertainment purposes. The characters, events, businesses, and situations presented in the video are fictional and are not intended to represent real individuals, companies, or specific real-life events. Some locations, brands, or cultural references may appear as part of the setting to make the story feel more realistic, but they are used only as narrative elements within the story. The goal of this content is to explore themes such as relationships, personal growth, accountability, and emotional healing through dramatic storytelling. Viewers should understand that the situations described are part of a scripted narrative designed to encourage reflection and discussion about values like respect, honesty, and personal responsibility. This video does not claim to report real news or factual events, and it should be viewed purely as a fictional drama meant to inspire thought and conversation.